Hey everyone, so today I wanted to show you how to take your very own measurements. So the reason being able to take your own measurements is super important is because sometimes the results don't show up on the scale. The reason for this is because when you're working out, you're building muscle, and muscle weighs more than fat does. And so if you're building a lot of muscle, even if you are losing fat, the results won't show on the scale. But you'll notice that your clothes are fitting better and you're wondering how good your progress actually is. So it's really important to be able to take accurate measurements, and one of the most important things you need in order to take accurate measurements is a measuring tape. So this is a bendable measuring tape. As you can see, it has centimeters and inches, and it's super important. You don't want to use the metal measuring tape. That's just not going to work. This is really cheap. You can find it at any hobby or craft store. It's used for sewing. But if you don't have a cloth measuring tape like this, find some string or yarn, and that will work just perfectly. You can cut it, and then you could go ahead and measure it on a metal measuring tape later. So I'm going to show you the common areas that people measure, and then I'm going to show you how to measure areas that might not always have specific instructions on how to measure. So the first common area a lot of people measure is the chest. Now, the same thing, you measure the chest the same way, whether you're a guy or girl. You want to go right in the middle of the chest. You don't want to be super tight. You don't want to pull tight because that's going to be an inaccurate measurement. You want to be nice and loose and just measure across the chest, right across the middle. Now, you want to make sure that in the back, this isn't super low or super high. You want to try to line it up pretty accurately. And what you're going to do is put the date, whatever day it is, and write it on a piece of paper and write down chest and put the measurement there. Now, another common area that people like to measure is the waist. I usually measure the waist two different ways. The reason is, one, it seems to be a little bit more accurate, even though it's not the true waist. So when I measure the waist, I always find my belly button, and I go right across the belly button, and I make sure the measuring tape goes across the belly button, and I measure all the way around. Like I said, this isn't the true waist, but it's a good measurement to take because this is usually the largest area of your belly and the hardest area to get the weight off. So when you measure across, this is you measure this measurement here, and you'll put waist over the belly button. Now, another area where it's easier to measure the true waist is you bend at your hips side to side, and see this little fold right here when you're bending? That's where the true waist usually lines up. So you can measure right here, and it should be the smallest area of your stomach, and you measure around and you bend side to side to make sure you kind of got the true waist, and you write down the numbers once you get it. Now, the thighs and the arms are a little bit harder because you want to be accurate, and it's a little bit harder to be accurate. So for the thighs, you actually want to measure the largest part of the thighs. So you kind of bring your measuring tape up and down and go ahead, find the largest area and measure across your thighs. Once you get that, what you want to do is take note of where you're measuring, and then go ahead and measure how far it is up from the knee. Sorry, I got the wrong side. So you measure up from the knee, and the largest part of my thigh is about 10 inches up from the knee. So I turn it sideways and I get the 10 inches. And I want to make sure I write down 10 inches on that piece of paper because it's more important to measure in the exact same spot each time than it is to measure in the biggest area. So because sometimes it can be challenging to find the largest area, you want to make sure you also write down how high up from the knee that area is so you can kind of get the same results each time. Same with the left knee. Now your hips, you kind of are challenging for me always to measure. You want to get the largest part. So I always find my hip bone, the top of the hip bone with my thumbs, and then I go just right under it. But if you add the butt in, make sure you write the butt in there. But if you don't add the butt in, you want to make sure you write down that you didn't go over your butt, because you want to get an accurate measurement. Some people like to measure the butt with the hips. Some people don't. It really doesn't matter as long as you stay consistent with your measurements each and every time. Now the arms, you want to measure the largest part, which is challenging because it won't be hard to measure on your non-dominant arm, but measuring on your dominant arm is going to be hard. So you want to make like a little loop and kind of go up and down to see where the biggest spot on your arm is. And then you go ahead and measure it. Make sure you write left and right arm, because your arms and thighs are going to be different from each other. But you'll notice when you start working out more, the measurements are going to try almost even out on each arm. All right? So that's how you measure the common areas. Now, if there's an area that's not really common to measure that you want to measure, you just got to make sure that you measure the same thing each time. So say I wanted to measure my calf, the largest part of my calf. I'll go ahead and measure it. And then what I do is I write it down, and then I measure up from my ankle or from ankle, how high up from my ankle that largest part of my calf is, and I make sure I write it down so next time I measure the exact same spot. So as you can see, the most important thing about measurements is just being consistent on where you measure each time so that you can accurately see your results. So hopefully this really helps you to take accurate measurements. And if you have any questions about it, please feel free to ask me or message me or email me, and I'll be happy to answer. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!